I'm Christy Clark, and these are the 5 underreported stories that you need to know. Hey everyone, welcome back to Underreported Stories, where I cover the news that CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News fail to report or don't report on enough. Today's show, as always, is based in logic, facts, and truth. And today, I have a video pulled up of Judge Joe Brown blasting Kamala Harris for allegedly flirtatious behavior, to say the least, in California. We also have Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, paying a very hefty price for violating privacy policies. And there's also this story we have of a dad who won a custody battle in California for his son. And I guess his ex-wife was raising the son as non-binary. It's crazy. We're going to get into everything. First up, during an interview on YouTube, Judge Joe Brown called Kamala Harris lazy and said that when she worked in California, she would flirt to get what she wanted. He said this among a lot of other things. We're going to watch this video together.
Harris, how you feel about her?
She's a piece of shit. I was in California. She lacked professional competence, and she worked on it by hiking up her hemline when she needed influence rather than researching. I was out in California for 15 years doing my show when she was at her peak, and she had a reputation amongst the trial lawyers of being lazy.
Yikes. What an accusation to lob against somebody. Not only that they're lazy, but in lieu of working, they work by hiking up their skirt, quote unquote.
She just hike her skirt up and try to flirt. And she wasn't that good in the courtroom, if not
Shocker.
Pretty bad in the courtroom. So I'm not surprised at what she does. She's 60 years old, and I think, listening to her word salad and the way she talks, I think she's got early onset dementia and also some problems with menopausal complications.
I don't know if that's essentially fair to say that because she has a word salad, she might have dementia or menstruation. That strikes me as odd, very weird comment. Although I will say the word salad things goes to being lazy, perhaps just unprepared, not doing adequate speech writing, not doing adequate critical thinking in the moment. All of those things kind of add up to who Kamala Harris is. I don't think we should be inferring that she has menstruation or menopause problems, but whatever. It's pretty funny either way.
That's that. You see, today is going to be tomorrow, so since it's going to be tomorrow, today we have tomorrow, which is why we are now. Like, what did you say? They have something in mind, but they cannot cognate getting all the way through it, which is why she's famous for this word salad garbage, and she doesn't make a bit of sense.
I mean, he's not entirely wrong. What I did find most interesting about the response to this video is that no one is defending Kamala Harris. They're just mad that someone called her out for her behavior. Vibe put out this article titled, Judge Joe Brown's disparaging Kamala Harris remarks stir controversy, and it kind of goes through all of the different comments that he made that we already heard, the full YouTube video, which is linked below if you want to watch it. But here are some of the people that were reacting. Elect Lady Purvis said, I was on my YouTube channel and saw that ignorant Judge Joe Brown speaking nasty things about our VP. I know she's strong and knows this kind of talk is coming. However, when it comes from a black man calling her, no respect for him. This next person said, and critiques like this are never valid. Judge Joe Brown is a cable channel living room judge who should enjoy his retirement quietly. Somebody else called him a bigoted, misogynistic jerk. Notice, though, that no one is saying that he's lying. They're just unhappy with the potential truth about Kamala Harris. I personally just don't think calling Kamala Harris a hoe is going to win the election for Republicans, but I also don't feel bad for her. Two things can be true at once, right? She has spent her whole life pretending to be like holier than thou and then also relatable. She's not either. And then she also complains about Trump's horrible moral compass, which that's a fair criticism, but not when you have a horrible moral compass yourself. At least Trump owns it, right? I think she's just a bad politician. She's just bad at this. Either be a hoe and own it, or don't act better than everyone when your history is sketchy, to say the least. And speaking of sketchy characters, Kamala's national security advisor is currently being probed over ties to an Iranian influence network. Today's reporting comes from the Washington Free Beacon. This is incredibly fascinating if you're into kind of understanding the ins and outs of Middle Eastern politics. If you're not, I promise you there's tidbits about this that relates back to American politics. But Tom Cotton and Elise Stefanik, these are this Senator Tom Cotton and representatives, so members of Congress in the U.S., have launched an official probe into Kamala's national security advisor over alleged ties to an Iranian government influence network. So they sent a letter to Kamala Harris, Cotton and Stefanik, asking her about this advisor named Phil Gordon. He has connections to somebody named Arian Tabatabai. She is a senior Department of Defense official who was reportedly involved in an Iranian government operation to expand Tehran's soft power in the U.S. Tehran is the capital of Iran, by the way. So the letter talks about these opinion pieces written by Phil Gordon, who is Kamala's national security advisor, with this person, Tabatabai, who is clearly kind of in favor of Iran. And these articles dating back a couple of years have all been about the important role that Iran plays in the world. Now, we can kind of get into what Iran has been accused of, but it's very concerning, to say the least, that Kamala's top security advisors are trying to make nice with a country that supports terrorism. And I will back that claim up in a second. What was really interesting about this article is that in a March 2020 article, it was talking about how Phil Gordon and Tabatabai claimed continued sanctions on Iran would create catastrophe in the Middle East, even though a lot of the times it's been argued that sanctions actually move people because these people in the Middle East respect hard power. They respect when you are aggressive towards them as opposed to weak. Lots of Middle Eastern scholars will tell you about this. But this is essentially an insight into what a Kamala Harris administration would look like in terms of the Middle East. It would be soft power's bias in favor of Tehran. And like I said, I want to back up my claims because Iran matters a lot when it comes to the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas in the Middle East. So I'm going to give you a quick political lesson, but I want to pull up a map for this just so you can kind of keep up if this is not your foray. Maybe you can learn something from this. Okay, so on the map, let me zoom out a little bit more. You can see Iran is over here. This is their capital, okay? And then all the way over here, we have Israel, Lebanon, and Gaza, okay? So Iran, which is all the way over there, their military is one and the same with the terrorist group called Hezbollah. So Hezbollah operates right here. This is Lebanon, and they operate right along this border, which is the northern border of Israel. So right here is the northern border of Israel. Down here is the southern border of Lebanon. For the listening audience, feel free to come over to YouTube or Rumble to see this portion. It's cool with the map and everything. And so a lot of times you'll hear people, very smart people, call Hezbollah a, quote, proxy group for Iran. But the truth is, they aren't a proxy group because they are literally connected to the Iranian government. So you're not a proxy of somebody when you are one and the same. And so this terrorist organization up here is also sending money and ammunition to the Gaza Strip, which is where Hamas occupies this area, right? This area of what is considered Palestinian territory. So this just goes to show, all of this connectedness goes to show that being nice to the people who fund terrorists, probably not a good idea. When Kamala Harris's national security advisor is advocating for Iran, they're advocating for countries and dictators that aren't just anti-Semitic, but anti-Western. They're completely against our values, and Kamala's team thinks appeasing dictators will work better than showing them strength. Do what you will with that information. Vote how you please after knowing that. Before we head into our non-Kamala stories of the day, would you please be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel on YouTube and Rumble. If you're in the listening audience, please rate this podcast 5 stars and share on your social media platforms. Be sure to tag me in those, okay? Our next story is some good news for once. Actually, I have 2 good news stories back to back. Meta, which owns Instagram and Facebook, is being forced to pay the state of Texas $1.4 billion for collecting users' biometric data without proper authorization. Basically, Facebook automatically turned on a feature that utilized facial recognition without telling people that that feature was already turned on. So the article from the Federalist does a great job at breaking this whole story down because it is really interesting. It's a great win for not just conservatives, just for Americans. So it says Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has secured a $1.4 billion settlement from Meta. Meta, formerly Facebook, released this feature in 2011 that used software to recognize individuals to assist users in tagging people in photos. So this is a while ago, back kind of OG Facebook. In a press release from Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, he said Meta automatically turned this feature on for all Texans without explaining how the feature worked. Then, unbeknownst to most people, for more than a decade, Meta was running facial recognition software on virtually every face contained in the photographs uploaded to Facebook, which is, capturing very private information. And I know a lot of people will argue, oh, well, if you don't want your information out there, don't put it on social media. Well, the problem here is that under a 2009 law in Texas, companies were forced to inform users and receive consent on any biometric information. And Facebook, obviously, we now know, did not do that. So the data was supposed to be destroyed after a year. They also didn't do that. So when all of this came to light, Ken Paxton sued Meta in 2022 over this issue. And yeah, Meta will be paying this massive settlement to the state over the course of 5 years. This is considered a victory across the board. And there's not really too much I have to say here other than this is a big win against big tech overreach. And I do hope that more states hop onto lawsuits similar to this. In some more happy news, a dad won full custody of his 4-year-old son after the child's mother allegedly tried to raise the child as non-binary without the child showing any signs of gender confusion. So this is a great write-up. It's really going to flesh everything out. The write-up is from the New York Post, but it's all from a podcast from the Daily Signal. Full disclosure, I have great friends over there, and it was the first internship I ever had. So a California father said he's been granted full custody of his 4-year-old son named Sawyer. This is because the mom was essentially trying to, for better lack of a word, trans her kid. And I'm not entirely sure if it was transing, but it was just like this effort to make sure he knew he could pick his gender. But the dad said, quote, "I know he's a boy. He wants to be a boy. He adamantly expresses that. If you say anything to the contrary, he gets very upset." Like, the child is not confused about the gender portion. The mom is. So the dad says that Sawyer's mom, which is his ex-wife or ex-girlfriend, he said she identifies now as a lesbian or a non-binary lesbian. And she was trying to push kind of the gender ideology, gender cult, whatever you want to call it, onto the child from the time he was a baby. Very concerning. Look how cute the little smile is. Oh my goodness. Okay. So part of what the mom allegedly did was refer to this 4-year-old boy and younger, so for the first 4 years of his life, with they, them pronouns, despite the kid saying, no, I don't want that. And the mom allegedly forced the kid, the male child, to wear girls' diapers, girls' dresses, and makeup. Very scary the way that the mom was manipulating in this way. Also, I am just curious on my own part. I'm like, how did you guys go from having a child to her being a non-binary lesbian? This is incredibly weird. He wrote the dad wrote in a Give, Send, Go page raising funds for his legal fight, quote, "Unfortunately, that excitement turned into pain when his mother, who suffers from serious underlying mental health problems, abruptly ended our relationship and prevented me from seeing Sawyer." Apparently, this has been an ongoing problem, but, oh, little advertisement popping up. Back down. But Sawyer's mother's gender obsession only grew, and the boy remained subject to all of these, quote, manipulative tactics. The mother allegedly sent the son to have a girly-themed birthday party where he wore a dress, but also had a sheriff's badge. So it really does seem like this woman really, really, really wanted her child to be able to, quote, choose her gender. By the way, if you hear like weird barking, I don't know if it's picking it up in the microphone. One of the dogs I'm watching is just having a nightmare. Poor guy. But anyway, this is where the story gets interesting. So after learning about Sawyer's mom being arrested for felony child endangerment, that is when the dad was able to file for full custody in this case. And he had 8 hours of police body cam footage and over 800 pages of supporting documents. And the court originally sided with Sawyer's mother. So he kept putting in appeals after appeals, claims with Child Protective Services in San Francisco over, literally, you guys have to understand, there's a mountain of evidence. This woman has been arrested for felony child endangerment. But because she was okay with this whole gender thing, the court was siding with her. Incredibly scary. But I guess the mom trying to paint him as some right-wing hillbilly from Mississippi, even though that had nothing to do with it. And now he has won full custody. Such a victory. It's so much better for this child. But I will say, as part of my ongoing obsession with my job, I read this parental blog called Parents with Inconvenient Truths About Trans. It's called PIT. And I have heard stories about this idea of latching onto gender ideology during a divorce or like a split of sorts. It's actually growing in commonality, or at least growing in commonality on this blog that I read. Unfortunately, what happens is that the parent who is least likely to have custody of the child, it's actually usually the father, will be really accepting of a kid's gender ideology or push gender ideology on the child because courts, as we see in this case, tend to favor the parent that goes along with this. So, while I'm very, very happy for Sweet Sawyer and his father, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to parents weaponizing gender to spite their ex. And speaking of weaponizing gender, Kamala Harris's vice presidential pick, or soon to be vice presidential pick, I just know it's going to be him. Josh Shapiro collaborated with the trans lobby to target counselors who didn't immediately gender transition minors.
Oh, but he's a moderate, Chrissy.
Okay, yeah, relative to some people, sure, I will admit that. He is definitely more moderate than other crazy left-wingers. But this policy sure ain't moderate for Americans. In some great exclusive investigative reporting from the Daily Caller, this is from Megan Brock. I used to work with her. She's awesome. And just like the way that she digs and digs and digs. So this is going to be a little bit of a longer kind of rendezvous through the story. Promise you, it's so worth it. So Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, his reportedly Vice President Kamala Harris's shortlist running mate, I'm pretty sure it's him already. I mean, I'm recording this on August 1st, but I have a feeling it's him. He collaborated with transgender activists to target professionals, specifically mental health professionals, who help children resolve their distress about their gender without life-altering medical treatments. So these are people who consider themselves, well, they are mental health experts, and instead of giving children a pathway to medicalization, they have opted to what people in the industry confirm as or consider watchful waiting. So, according to this article, the Shapiro administration and representatives of an LGBT activist group called the Trevor Project worked behind the scenes in a very systematic campaign to impose bans on what they dub conversion therapy. So for the sake of this, watchful waiting, which means not medicalizing immediately after a child says that they have gender distress, is considered conversion therapy in Pennsylvania, which is crazy. The craziest part about this is that this would usually go to Congress, the Pennsylvania Congress, and they would, in the state, make this law via legislation. Nope, they did this entirely through activism. So, the Trevor Project was investigating specific licensed therapists, some of whom were connected to Christian groups, so specifically targeting Christian therapists because they didn't like that there were watchful waiting conversion therapy happening under their watch. So what the Shapiro administration did was they pressured state licensing boards to adopt strict policy statements that gave them authority to discipline professionals engaging in watchful waiting. So this article does a really great job at explaining what I did just explain in fewer words, honestly, but obviously explaining very, very well that conversion therapy is not conversion therapy. It used to be, when you were same-sex attracted, you would get conversion therapy and you'd no longer be same-sex attracted. Obviously, that didn't work. You can have your own opinions on that. I'm not going to opine on that. But that is what people are saying. They're calling conversion therapy and watchful waiting the same thing. So what Megan's article goes on to say is that all 5 policy statements clarify, the policy statements, again, not being law, they're just policy statements put out by activist groups, clarify that gender transition treatments included life-altering medical or surgical interventions aimed at changing a minor's sex are not considered to be a form of conversion therapy. Therefore, they are encouraging licensed therapists to have kids undergo gender transitions, but not watchful waiting. Okay? Very crazy. So, this is the section that I thought was incredibly interesting. Megan called it more binding than law because, like I said, there was no law implemented in place. Perry Monastero, who spent more than 5 years working on behalf of the Trevor Project, an LGBT activist organization to ban conversion therapy in Pennsylvania, praised the state's board adoption of the conversion therapy policy statement, calling them more binding than law. So what's happening is these advocacy organizations are basically being more effective by forcing these LGBTQ preferential policies on the state board, and then the state board pushes that onto the licensed therapists, the trained therapists, the therapists who want to be the students who want to be therapists. This is now forced on them, but not through law, not through elected lawmakers, through LGBT advocacy groups. And the Shapiro administration was instrumental in getting this done. This is what you can expect from a Harris Shapiro administration. Licensed medical professionals will lose their jobs for doing what is best for a child's mental health. We'll have zealot activists running policy by circumventing Congress without it ever being implemented into law. And we'll have radical views on gender that the majority of Americans don't agree with. And mark my words, if God forbid these two get into office and implement policies like this nationwide, even the liberal moms will revolt. This will end with Republicans winning and the trans lobby being crushed by a bunch of detransitioners. I can almost guarantee it. But that is all for me this week in terms of news stories. For the real ones out there, if you sat through all of this and you loved it, will you please drop the lips emoji as a form of making fun of Kamala for being a flirt, allegedly? As always, that emoji is linked in the description. But thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe on your way out. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you back here on Monday. Bye, friends.